So that's all very interesting, but what we actually want to reach is, of course, remote command execution. Is that possible via expression language? Well, it's very challenging because we have restrictions. It needs to be a one-liner. We cannot do calls to static methods, that's not allowed. And we can only start from a variable which is in EL scope. So it has to be one of these. That's where we have to start from. So the usual way to get remote command execution in Java is using the runtime library. Do you think this statement is accepted as EL? No, it's not. Why? Well, it's a static method. getRuntime is statically dereferenced from the runtime class. So it's not allowed. So we have to come up with another trick. So here's a way you can reach remote command execution using expression language. We start with an empty string. This is a literal and it's allowed as one of the first variables in EL. Because a string is an object in Java, not a primitive type, we can do something like this, get class. And class is an object in Java that represents a Java class. It has methods like getConstructor, getMethod, etc. One of the functions is forName, and this function returns the class object of any class that you give it as a string. So we can sort of transform from a string class now to a process builder class. And why are we using process builder? Well, we use it instead of the runtime because process builder allows you to set the command via the constructor. And runtime needs a call to runtime get runtime, which is not allowed. So we're going to use process builder. Then we need to invoke the constructor. So we call the function getConstructors. Process builder has two constructors actually, so we need to index it with either 0 or 1. I will explain later why I put a 1 in here. But for now, just assume that at index 1 we have the constructor that takes a string array, as you can see here on the bottom of the page. And then we need to inject our command, but we need to pass it as a string array instead of just a string. So we use this trick with the split function to transform a string that we give into a string array. So this string array will contain two elements, first one being touch and the second one being temp foobar. And then we only have to call the start function to start execution. And that's the full EL statement to reach remote command execution. Like I said, the EL payload often needs fine-tuning because of the different implementations. But also the order of the constructors returned by getConstructors changes each time the JVM is restarted. So we don't actually know what index we have to use to get the right constructor. It needs some trial and error. As there are only two constructors, you can just try 0 the first time and 1 the second time and see which one works. But for other classes there may be like 20 constructors. But of course we can also write an EL statement that gives us this information. And that's what you see here below. So let me go through it. We use the faces context variable. It's the implicit object that holds a lot of information. We refer to the external context and that one has a function called setResponseHeader. So we can set HTTP header, and in that way we can communicate information back to us. Very useful one. So we call the header S0 and then we print the name of the constructor. So we do the same trick. We start with a literal, we get the class, we transform it to process builder, then we get constructor 0 just to try, and then we do toString. So the name of the constructor will be the value of the HTTP header as 0. And you see the result in the image below. And that way we learn that on index 0 we have the constructor taking a list of strings. And that's the one we didn't want. We want the constructor that takes the string array. And therefore we could find out that we needed to use index 1.